Welcome back, folks. I'm Frizz, and today I'd like to take some time to talk about the future of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. To be more exact, I'd like to talk about current gaps that I see in Pathfinder 2e as a system I'd like to be filled. Rather than talking about, classes that I want to see, I'd like to talk about mechanical niches that aren't being filled right now. I do genuinely believe that the best thing for 2e as a system right now would be new general and skill feats. For example, like a general feat that allows you to draw and use a consumable item that is lower than your level in a single action. But I highly doubt that there's going to be an entire book dedicated to general and skill feats. So instead, let's talk about what kind of mechanical roles and rules I think are currently missing from Pathfinder 2nd Edition and how I'd like to see them implemented. So first off, there's one classic trope that I'm honestly shocked Paizo hasn't really touched in 2e yet. Intelligent items have always been really fascinating to me, and playing a character that specializes in using one particular intelligent item is a really fun concept. There's a reason why the Blackblade Magus was so popular in Pathfinder 1st Edition after all. Rather than seeing a concept like this get restricted to a particular class, I'd rather prefer to see this represented as an archetype that's dedicated to the entire concept. Maybe you could spin feats to give your new object friend some basic spellcasting capabilities, or just the ability to teleport back into your hand. Paizo could also approach this concept by making a specific familiar type for objects. But in my opinion, that intrudes way too much onto the Baba Yaga Witch Patron's territory, so I'd actually rather not see them approach it that way. I don't have a super clear mechanical vision for exactly how this archetype would work, but I would just love to see a character that has their own intelligent magical item, and that would just be really fun, and I want to see it come back from Pathfinder 1st Edition in some form or another. Another archetype that I'd love to see, and I'm actually kind of surprised that Paizo hasn't touched at all, is an archetype that's based around powering yourself up while also applying large penalties to yourself. For the sake of this video, we're going to be calling this archetype the Risk Taker. Yeah, I know, I'm bad at names. If you think about it, while it isn't a super common trope, often characters in media can push themselves further than beyond their limits at the sake of hurting themselves. For example, forcing more power into a spell by giving yourself a concussion, or someone accelerating their heart rate to fight better, but basically giving themselves a heart attack. And yeah, I know that I'm basically just describing Burn from Pathfinder 1st Edition. I've got some ideas for how this could actually work mechanically. Basically, as one or two actions, you could voluntarily gain the drain condition, or increase a pre-existing drain condition to give yourself some kind of boost for the next minute. Let's say a +1 status bonus to all attack rolls, and also spell DCs. That's amazing for that minute, but now you're stuck with a drain condition for the rest of the day, and drained is one of the worst conditions in the game to be stuck with. Other feats could give different options for what kind of boost you get, or perhaps help you heal from being drained faster overnight. But I'm really just a sucker for huge risk versus reward situations, and I'd love to make a character that really leans into scratching that itch. Before we get into my unrealistic dreams for classes, I should probably address Pathfinder 1st Edition classes real quick. I've talked about this before, but the classes that I want to see the most return from Pathfinder 1st Edition right now are the Shifter and the Inquisitor. The Shifter is a really cool concept that I don't think got the love it deserves in 1st Edition, and the Inquisitor is just a really fun character concept. I do expect that Paizo will rename the Inquisitor though, since there are a lot of implications attached to that name, and it locks the entire class into a particular type of character. But anyway, my first idea for a class isn't really associated with any particular type of flavor. Really, I have no idea what this class would be, but there is a large gap in the system currently that is interesting enough for a full class to be based around it, rather than just an archetype. And that gap is stances. This might seem a little bit weird, since monks are currently considered to be a pretty stance-heavy class. I'd personally disagree with that statement though, since while every monk uses a stance in almost every situation, they basically only use that one stance. For another example of why I'm bad with names, let's call this class the Disciple. There are two main components to the Disciple. First off, every Disciple has two different stances automatically at level 1, a defensive and an offensive stance. The defensive stance could be the same for all Disciples, and it makes acting offensively more difficult. I'm thinking that it give you a bonus to AC but a penalty to all attack rolls. The offensive stance would depend on your subclass and give some kind of benefit offensively, like extra precision damage on your attacks or a boost to movement speed. The drawback, naturally, is that you're going to be taking a penalty to your armor class the entire time, so the turn-to-turn decision-making for a Disciple is what stance do you want to be in at any given moment, so you have to swap between them depending on the circumstances. The second part of the class would be some kind of effect whenever you enter or whenever you leave a stance. For example, maybe whenever you enter the defensive stance, you can take a step, and whenever you exit the offensive stance, you can make a strike. I'm not certain exactly how it would work, or if those are remotely the kind of tools that this class should get, but rewarding people for changing stances is really what the class is all about. Stances are a very interesting concept in my mind, but right now it feels like no class or archetype really takes advantage of what they could be. You just enter into your chosen stance as soon as you can, and then you don't think about it for the rest of the fight. I personally absolutely think that there is room for an entire martial class based around stances. I have no idea what the flavor would be, but I really do think that the mechanics would be very interesting. The final idea for a class concept that I have is very simple. If you just convert the Solarion from Starfinder into Pathfinder 2e, you will get my money, Paizo. To be a little bit more serious, the Solarion it has a super interesting dynamic flow throughout combat encounters in Starfinder, because they slowly build up to big climaxes as rounds pass. And I'd love to see a class with a similar kind of mechanic where they build up charge before eventually releasing it all at once for huge climactic effects. That's just a really cool concept to me, and yeah, the Solarion is my favorite Starfinder class. So I have no real expectations for any of these concepts to be put out by Paizo anytime soon. But, I mean, I can dream, right? And also, I'm not a game designer, so I have no idea if anything that I've actually said in this video is balanced without seeing it in action, of course. But really, there's so much room left in 2e for potentially really interesting mechanics, and I hope that Paizo takes their time and really makes sure that what they put out is up to the highest standard that they've set for themselves, all throughout Pathfinder 2e's publication history. Thanks for watching. Rambling every once in a while about stuff that I'd like to see is fun, even if it is all very unlikely. But what do you think about my ideas, and what gaps do you personally see in the system that you'd like to see Paizo focus on? Let me know in a comment down below, and subscribe or something while you're down there. Also, please consider joining the channel as a member. It's the best way to support me. But regardless, until I see you next, live a wonderful life.